Hello and welcome to VR Verdict, episode 69, our weekly podcast where we talk about everything VR. I am PJ, and Wookie is not joining us this episode, or we probably would have had something funny to say about the episode number. This episode, we will be talking to two gentlemen from Garage Collective who are working on their game Stones of Harlath, coming soon to Steam and PC VR, but right now it's out on Oculus Quest and Quest 2. We talk a great deal about the game and their vision for it and how they made it this far. But before we get into it, I have some exciting news. Well, I think it's exciting. Hopefully everyone else does. But if you're not following us on Twitter, we have some exciting news. We're joining forces with Spatial Ape Group. We're going to be moving our podcast into VR. So we'll be doing the show live and be joinable in VR Thursday nights starting on July 1st. We will still have... So right now we record Monday nights, and then if we talk to someone from a very different time zone, we shoot for like a Saturday type thing. So there will be some live shows on Saturdays as well. But for the bulk of it, it'll be Thursday nights live every week, and we'll also be streaming it to our YouTube and Facebook channels. So we'll have our own live booth or stage, and that area will have a presence in VR 24/7. And when we're not doing the show, we'll be sharing clips and artwork and music there, and we're going to change the show a little bit. Taking questions from the crowd, guests will be able to bring assets from their game into VR, and we can display them, so it should make things a lot more interactive and engaging. Nothing will change with the podcast in an audio format. We'll still be releasing an episode every week, an audio version. We've been podcasting for many, many years, and I love the medium, so whether you listen or watch or hang out with us while we do it, we love that you're here listening. We'll be transitioning through the month of July. We kind of had some guests booked through there, so it might be a strange month for us and releases, but stick with us. We'll get on track and get it all set. We do have a couple other cool things coming we'll share with you later, but definitely try to make the first show July 1st, 7 p.m. Central. We'll be giving away a lot of good game codes. Going to be exciting. Be fun to hang out. We'll be around before and after the show to hang out and talk and see what happens. But thanks again, everyone, for listening and hanging out with us. But let's get into Stones of Harlath. Joining me this episode is Surreal and Simeon from Garage Collective, working on their game Stones of Harlath. How's it going, guys?
Good. How about yourself, PJ?
Fantastic.
Yeah, it's going great. Thanks for having us.
Yeah. I saw your game, just a video of it before it came out, and I was like, what is this? I have to play this. It looks so good. So for those listening, Stones of Harlath, I'll let you guys explain. It'll probably go over well. How would you explain your game?
Stones of Harlath is an adventure game. It's a first-person adventure game that is channeling a strong retro vibe. So it is an homage to the games that I was playing when I was a kid, yeah, I mean, it's basically kind of like trying to kind of bring back a little bit the magic of like discovering those kind of like big pixels on the screens, but while still infusing gameplay with like some much more modern components, which in our case are represented by Simeon.
Yeah, so I would add to that it's very much an action-oriented sort of dungeon crawler experience with some added fun in that you can interact with characters prior to going on these dungeon crawling quests. And it also has a smaller open world area, which I think is one of the hallmarks of this game that we really enjoyed creating.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
I think you guys nailed the retro feel because when you put a VR headset on, you're kind of expecting like, well, it depends what you're looking for, but you're not expecting like 8-bit artwork and all that. And it's kind of it's very charming. Like when you get in there, like it's just that you really feel like you said, you're in the games that I played when I was in my childhood. So you guys really hit that nail on the head. And I love the fact that the character you can switch from melee to like battle mage and do magic or melee combat is really, really neat.
Yeah, for us, when so there are really two aspects in here. There is obviously the visual aspects, and then there is the gameplay aspect. For the visual aspect, one of the things that when I was a kid or when I was a teenager, you were playing those games, and you were always kind of like you were completely into them, right? We talk about immersion for VR, but the reality is that if you were a kid in the 80s and you were playing a video game, you were already immersed. Now you did not necessarily have like a VR headset or anything like that, but you were completely into it because it was new, it was novel, it was a game that was kind of like responding to your actions, etc., etc. And so I think that the current modern VR medium is allowing us to kind of ask ourselves the questions. It's like, is this what it would have felt? Is this what it would feel nowadays? The same way we felt 20 years ago, right? And so there is kind of like bringing back that kind of like old school vibe to the modern technology. And then there is the fact that we still have a modern technology that is there that allows us kind of like multiplied interactions, a lot more kind of control over the gameplay and things like that. And that's what Simeon is talking about in the fact that there is the kind of retro look, but there is also the more modern aspect of interaction and how we engage with the gameplay mechanics.
Yeah. I always wondered, and I'm curious to hear you guys' take on it. When you talk about games we played with, lesser graphics and all that, do you think that maybe lent to a lot of your imagination kind of kicking in and filling the blanks type of thing while you're playing? And that's part of the nostalgia, or?
Yeah, I believe so. The thing is that I'm not sure that you want necessarily filling the blanks as in like completing stuff that were not shown, but the way your brain is kind of interpreting those images is like you're making them yours because you're reading them your own way, and your brain is kind of completing that information. And I do believe that there is a sentiment of like, this is my stuff. I'm not just looking at something that is being kind of like pre-designed for me. I'm actually kind of a co-designer of bringing it to life. That maybe doesn't exist with games that are a little bit more realistic, where you're just kind of in awe for the spectacle. But I think that when you're the active contributor to kind of like the aesthetic and how you react to it, I think it makes it more personal. So it's not that much of like, it's not like a connect the dot type of thing, because I think those graphics, I mean, if we talk about like the 1-bit or 8-bit area, obviously these were like a lot more simplified. But as soon as we get into the 16-bit areas, you had beautiful pixel art that was showing you stuff in like multiple colors with a definition that was acceptable and things like that. But you were still kind of like, there was still that kind of additional layer between you and reality, where you were being the translator. And that I want to kind of not lose in VR.
Right. Yeah, that totally makes sense.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was gonna add that in VR, even more so because it's VR. It's funny, like I don't often get to interact with first-time VR users, but I did the other day, and he put on the headset to try our game, and he held up his hands, and he had that novel experience that first-time VR users have, and they're like, "Wow, these are my hands!
Yeah.
Like these are my hands in VR." So that's another very interesting thing to add to the art style as well, is that it's yours through and through.
Yeah, I think that to kind of like piggyback on what Simeon is saying, there is a little bit of realism don't necessarily engage you. Realism, you're a spectator to it.
Mm-hmm.
and I think that there is kind of something to be said for like you being an actor into kind of creating and intellectualizing what you're seeing. And I think that distance from realism can help. I remember having that discussion with one of my students that was making a VR game, and it was kind of like a detective from the early 20s, etc. And I was like, why don't you make it black and white? And it was like, it's VR. People expect color. And I was like, well, I think that what would be interesting in VR is to bring it in black and white. So to make it look different than what you expect. And I think that when things look different than what you expect, there is kind of like an intellectual kind of co-creation that is happening between like the actor, the player, and the environment.
Yeah, I agree. Like, you just take like Super Hot, for example, is just 2 colors, and it's pretty gripping and it's an unforgettable experience. But I do agree, like, there's plenty of room to try different aesthetics in VR and see what works.
Yeah. You cannot see me, but I'm nodding hardcore.
As a group, you mentioned there's 2 of you here, 2 out of 3 out of the company or studio. How long have you guys been around, and how many games have you made together?
Together, it's the first one. Simeon, do you want to go maybe in? Do you want to take this one first?
Sure. So I had known Cyril previously from working together in college, but on previous student projects. Now he had let me know about his current, outside of school projects, the things he was working on, because he has worked on several games, published things that I'm sure he'll get into. But he was telling me about this cool VR idea he had. It was going to be pixel art. It was going to be, an adventure, semi-open world type magic experience. And I was putting the pieces together. I'm like, oh, that sounds like it might be interesting, And he said, hey, you do a lot of coding. Would you be interested in jumping on the project, seeing how it goes? And I said, all right, yeah, we'll give it a shot. And it turned out to be a ton of fun. So this is the first project we've worked on together. I've worked on some of my own stuff separately, and so has he. But it's been great so far working with Cyril.
Awesome.
Yeah, and so as far as I'm concerned, so I teach in a school. I teach game design and game production. That's how I met Simeon. And I've I dabbled a little bit in VR a long time ago when I was a student myself in the 90s, the first rise of VR. And it kind of like went away. And I did a lot of like browser-based games and games on like very, very retro platforms. I've done a bunch of 1-bit games, etc., etc. And I was tasked with teaching some of the early classes on AR and VR classes, introduction to AR and VR classes. And so I was like, well, I mean, if I'm going to teach those classes, I want to kind of like make a project to kind of like understand the full scope of it. So I've developed a game that was called Theta Legion on the Oculus Go. With a different partner. It was a first-person shooter, same aesthetic, like that kind of pixel art aesthetic, because that's I've been working on games since the late 90s, and so I'm kind of a pixel art guy, and that's something that I know well. I'm pretty fast at it, and it's an aesthetic that I like very much. It's all about control. It's all about so it's something that I'm very comfortable with. And so we made a Theta Legion on the Go, which was our first pixel art game. And then I kind of continued working a little bit on alone. And then I ended up partnering with another company, with another person, to bring Theta Legion on the Rift. And after we've done that, I was feeling like ready for kind of a reboot. I had spent the last 2 years like working on a sci-fi environment, and I wanted to do something kind of like more. I have 2 speeds, right? It's like either my games are sci-fi based or they are like fantasy based. And so, like, okay, I've spent 2 years in sci-fi. I need my fantasy fix now, when I was presenting Tita Legion, I was at a conference that's called DreamHack in Atlanta, and my booth was right next to the booth of a company that was presenting their game, and it was called Ninja Legends, I believe. It was on the Quest, and it was a game, where you have like very broad like sword movement and things like that. And I remember being very jealous of them because like their players were moving like madmen. And with my first-person shooter, my players were a lot more static. And so I remember coming out of that conference and being like, you know what? I want a game that involves much more the player's body. And that's how I started thinking about casting the magic by drawing runes, etc., etc. So I've worked a couple months by myself. Since we both have full-time jobs, like I wanted to make sure that I would mature the idea, that I would have something to present to whoever would work with me, and like something solid that I believed in and that person could believe in. And then I started thinking of like who can I partner with that I know works well. And then Simeon, I had worked with him a little bit. He kind of became a no-brainer, so I reached out, and that's how we started working together on Stones of Harlath.
That's crazy. I love that you say you have two speeds. You have fantasy and
Sci-fi.
Sci-fi, the two best ones. And I like that you kind of like, do one and then the other and kind of like refresh yourself. That's really neat.
Yeah, it's a good way to kind of like keep things interesting, right?
Yeah.
When we are both working on this during our free time, and so we need to make sure that it stays exciting.
Right.
And something that you do for too long doesn't get super exciting.
Sure. How long have you guys been working on Stones of Harlath?
I started solo in November, and Simeon joined me in February 2000. And was that?
Of last year, yeah.
Yeah, so February 2020 or 2020, February 2020.
Oh,
Yep.
so you do work pretty quick. That's pretty quick turnaround for a release.
Yeah, it's a pandemic baby.
Yeah, for sure.
And how is it after release? How's it been going? I know you guys have really quickly released a couple updates for like control and things like that, and which is really great to see. How's it going for you though?
Well, finally now we can. So I mean, there were a few other sites, but we have plans to kind of add more content, but we've kind of delayed those plans because we're like, okay, well, you know what, we need to do the smooth turning, we need to do the left hand stuff, like stuff that kind of fell through the crack or fell when we were busy with QA, we were like busy fixing like big bugs, and so like our kind of brains were collectively kind of focused on like taking those challenges, and some stuff kind of like got ignored. So I'm kind of glad that we've done this, so that now we can kind of like serenely go through content.
And I mean, like the first update was within the first week, right, for the smooth turning, and I think you added something else with that.
Yep, that's all on Simeon.
Yeah, we since like Cyril said, we had a few things that fell through the cracks just because we were spending so much time intensely on the list of things that we had to get done for release. And then as soon as people started saying, oh hey, it would be cool if we had smooth turning too, it'd be like, oh yeah, definitely do that. So I hopped right on that like immediately. Like how soon can we push this out? Because obviously people want that.
Yeah, it was one of them. I don't know what it is. Like snap turning is fine, but it's like jarring to me now that I've been playing VR for so long and stuff. But then I just tell my body, I'm like, just move your body, dummy.
No, you're absolutely right. And the thing is that both of us, for some reason, and I've played my fair share of VR games, but for some reason, like the snap turning is the thing that does it for me. Like the smooth turning doesn't. I don't know. It doesn't make me sick, but I prefer the snap turning because it's faster, I guess. Maybe I'm more of a twitch. I don't know. And so since none of us were using it, we knew that it needed to be there. But since none of us were using it, it's like the left hand thing. Like we had plans for it. But then those plans got swallowed up into like the things that we needed to fix before launch, and then it kind of slipped through the cracks.
Yeah, I think I'm In the last area, I've spent quite a few hours in there. I'm one of those people that'll just kind of walk around and look at things and then head on to the quest and then kind of just look at, chill out and
Yeah,
spend some time in the world. I really
that's
dig the world you guys have built, and I think it's like a perfect size right now for what's there just to walk around in.
that's great to hear that that you enjoy, hanging around and seeing what you can see. That definitely puts you kind of in our target audience. We like to hear that people are enjoying the world we've crafted. Not just the dungeons.
Yeah, yeah. I'm missing one. Is it treasure or artifact? You have 4 of them, I think. Uh, I think I missed the first one somewhere, so I'm kind of hunting for that right now.
Which one is it? Can
I
we
think
help
it's like
you
the
out?
bottles or something.
It's in the inn.
Oh, okay. Because I found the third one, I think. I'm like, oh, okay, you clever bastards. I see what's going on.
So, but that's a great point that you're bringing. Like it's kind of interesting because the genre of the game, it's a dungeon crawler adventure. So that means that you're going to get the interest of a lot of like very hardcore gamers.
Hmm.
But really, at heart, when we balance the game, when we design the game, and when we set up the experience, we kind of thought like we kind of like tweaked it to be very friendly to the people that are somewhat new to VR, and that kind of are going to enjoy kind of like being in the world and kind of looking around and stuff like that. And then of course you're going to have the players that are going to be completionists, that are going to kind of like beeline, directly to the objective and things like that. But
Yeah.
the parts that makes us the happiest is like when we hear of those players that kind of like say, you know what, I just took a stroll on the island and just to kind of enjoy the sights, like, because this is exactly what we had in mind, the type of players that we had in mind when we designed the environment. It's like we want to create sites, and we don't want it to be so big that it's going to be boring to kind of go
Yeah.
through there. Like we want to keep it kind of medium size so that it's always exciting and enjoying, and you can get there, you can get anywhere pretty fast, but you still have like some sites to soak in getting there.
Yeah. And I like to, like I said, when I explore, I'll use only one certain spell so I memorize it, because sometimes, like in the heat of the battle, it's like you kind of forget which spells you can do, type of thing. So I try to like do one at a time while I'm kind of just roaming around and get it in my head. So it's a really good practice for me.
That's absolutely normal. Like we want you to preemptively equip your spells, and that's why you have the book in that hand that now you can close. But that's why you have that book. It's like every spell is kind of like clearly spelled out, how to draw them, etc., etc. And now we've made an update, so you don't even need to draw them. You can actually touch the spell, and it's going to load it up in your hand. For the people that are struggling a little bit with the drawing, we felt that it was kind of an acceptable resolution.
Yeah, actually, that's really good because for accessibility for people. I really like the update you did to where you can cast while you're moving, because that was one thing getting me in trouble. I was running for my life quite a few times trying to cast a fire spell or something.
Yeah, that's an example of like player feedback being invaluable, right? I mean, for us, that the idea, the philosophy was like, we want you to kind of like stop, cast, like be exposed, right? It's like for us, there was like that kind of philosophy. You have a shield and a sword, and you're turtling, you're tanking, or you're kind of like going to do a lot of damage, but you're going to leave yourself exposed. And then we kind of learned that, well, players are not necessarily seeing this as black and white, and they want something in the middle. And so I think that the ability to cast spells while moving is kind of a good crossover.
Yeah, and with the size of the world we were talking about a little bit before, in my mind, like I didn't know how long the game was when I launched it, but I always, in my mind right now, VR games are kind of on the shorter side. So I like to really take extra time and hang out, because a lot of times if I just play through it, it's like, oh, it's over and there's no reason to go back. That's why I'm glad you guys are talking about future content. Not that I've finished it yet, but on our guest before on our last episode from Tab Games, I don't know what your feelings are, but like I actually really like episodic content in VR, because it gives me a reason to come back. Where like on a normal flat screen, like in console or PC gaming, I don't really like episodic stuff, but I think it works really well for VR because it gives you, you only want to be, most people only want to be in the headset for a couple hours at a crack. So if you can have a good experience for that couple hours and then work through it, I think that works out well.
I agree. I think you're touching on two important points there. Particularly, with devices like the Quest and things like that, like the battery is not going to be infinite. I mean, I know that some people have battery packs and things like that, but you can expect the players to kind of like have like the regular hardware. So like, for example, when you're designing dungeons and things like that, you want to make sure that you're not having a dungeon that takes like 6 hours to go through, because there is nothing more frustrating than having to kind of stop in the middle of the dungeon because your battery is kind of dying. So I think that when, as content developer, at least as far as I'm concerned, when I'm designing for VR, I kind of like think in lines of like bite size, like things that people can do and do meaningfully in one playthrough, not stuff that is going to take 6 or 10 hours to complete. That's very much like the philosophy of like World of Warcraft, right? Where it's like they kind of like scaled down some of their experiences so that people felt that they could do something meaningful in a short commitment of time. The beauty of the episodic content is, particularly because it's VR and it's a new medium and things like that, is that you can basically put something out there and then see how people react to it, and kind of like adjust and tailor your next content to kind of like factor what was the reaction on your previous one, like what people like, what they dislike, etc. So there is something extremely convenient about that, which is like, hey, you know what, we are going to make the next experience learning from the previous one. So that I definitely see that as a boon. Simeon, what are your thoughts on that?
That's a really good point from a developer standpoint as well. Being able to learn from the previous episode, and I totally agree with the bite-sized content. I know personally, I've spent less hours in VR than a lot of other hardcore VR users, and so that being the case, my bites tend to be slightly smaller when I play a game, and so I really enjoyed that. The dungeons that we made, like you said, weren't several hours long, and so they were a good bite size for me. So like as a player, I would enjoy playing my game because the bites are the perfect length for how long I want to play.
Yeah, I'm a very short fuse gamer. Like I'm very much of an explorer, meaning that when things are too long, if I stay in the same place for too long, I get bored very easily. So the games that usually get me are the ones where like I get to see something new at a nice rate. And so we design games for what we want to play. And to me, it's like, yeah, if like you put me 2 hours in VR in the same dungeon, seeing the same textures and the same thing, etc., it's just going to be kind of like I'm going to start feeling kind of claustrophobic and stuff like that. So we really wanted to make sure that you would get to the dungeon and it would be over before you were tired of it, that you would get a meaningful experience. And I was like, oh, that was cool. I was in that cool place. And now I can't wait to see what the next place is going to be. And we tried to make every single one of our dungeons like significantly different from the previous one, just to fulfill that thing. It's like, hey, you know what? You're progressing, you're moving forward, you're seeing something new every time.
Yeah. Has that changed the way you kind of develop? Because in my mind, and I'm not a developer or anything close to that, but for like a normal traditional game, you kind of complete the entire game. But for like the shorter experiences and stuff, do you kind of prioritize like I have to build the systems and this and that, and then I know when that stuff's solid, we can just add content at will type of thing?
Yes and no. As far as I'm concerned, and I'll let Simeon respond to kind of like the organization of it, but as art-wise and design-wise, as far as I'm concerned, all the games that I've made, even on flat screen, change is always a significant component of my games. Like I don't like people. I don't like to. I never made a game where you had only one level, right? It's always like, to me, like changing level and seeing something new is always part of the reward of progression. So I'm used to kind of make games that progress pretty fast. because as a player, that's what I want to see. I want my progress to feel meaningful, and therefore, like, I want the next thing to be different than the previous one. So it's a pipeline for me that is kind of like pretty usual.
Yeah, for as far as the organization of the order in which things are and implemented, one thing that I like to think about is what is the funnest part of the game? What is the one part that the players will just enjoy the most, and kind of design that first? Because if you find out that actually isn't fun, well, then your whole game needs to be redesigned. But if you can nail that down right away, like what is the most fun part, then the rest of it kind of unravels from that. Because one thing that I've discovered is that like the magic system or the way you can interact with enemies with your spells, it ended up being slightly different than I thought. I'm like, this is fun, but for a different reason. And so then that informed, how I designed the next set of enemies and how I designed like the interactions in the next dungeon. So I like to start from there.
Okay.
Yeah, one thing that that we did not necessarily anticipated when we started is like we were seeing kind of those spells as like, different ways to kind of like nudge the fight. But as Simeon started kind of integrating those spells, we realized that there was some sort of a synergy that existing between one spell to the next, and that a lot of the fun was kind of like combining those spells, or like using this one first, this one second, this one third, and that it would completely change the dynamic of the fight. And so we started with in one place, but as we play tested the game, we kind of like evolved into a different place.
That's awesome. I have to tell you that, thinking back, playing older games, pixel art games like 2D, and, you'd always get to the boss battles, and the boss was, somewhat bigger than you, but in VR, like, some of the enemies in here they're enormous. It's like, holy crap.
So yeah, it's one of my favorite game. It's actually one of my favorite, but one of the most foundational game that I played in VR was Farpoint. And I remember like that huge scarab that you're fighting, and I remember being like, "Oh my god, that thing is so big!" And so yeah, we have some enemies that, particularly if you're mentioning like one of our enemies in our later dungeon that is a huge thing that is normally not that big. That's completely based on that, right? It's like we want you to kind of feel that sense of scale, and it's like, oh my god, that thing is way bigger than it should be.
Yeah,
that's intended.
Yeah, that's awesome. Scale, I say this a lot on the podcast, but scale is my favorite thing in VR, like my favorite aspect. You shrink me down and just make me and put me in front of anything huge, my jaw drops.
Yeah, I think I totally agree with you there. VR is the perfect place for that.
Yeah, when I was a kid, I had two fantasies. One of them was to shrink, the size of like and kind of experience the world at that different scale. And the other one was to flip gravity so that I would walk everywhere on the ceiling and like the whole world would be upside down. And maybe the next game will be that, where it's like you're going to kind of visit like normal environments, but they are all flipped, and you need to kind of like cross over them. Like, yeah, VR allows you to kind of like take some of those kind of like kids' dream, what if, and bring them to life.
Yeah, I can only imagine like a Honey, I Shrunk the Kids experience in VR, how crazy that would be.
Yeah, I mean, what is Marvel waiting to do a Ant-Man VR video game?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right?
I try not to spoil anything, and I try not to like ask you guys questions that you don't want to answer, like future plans and stuff. But is there anything you want to share about anything upcoming for the game?
I don't know, Simeon. Do we want to share something?
I mean, we have some action-oriented content coming very, very shortly.
Awesome.
You can say more if you want, Cyril.
Yeah. So we have plans. We have kind of a medium-sized content update that we were really like looking forward to do, but that we kind of delayed a little bit because we wanted to take care of the smooth turning and the adjustable height, the closing the book, and the left-handed mode. So now that this is out of the way, we are planning our medium content update, which will be a free update. for the players, hopefully in the coming month and a half, which should be exciting. Which should bring also kind of like different type of excitement in the game. Like maybe this one may be more for like the people that really enjoy the fight and really enjoy the strategy of like spell casting and melee and like when to use one or the other, etc., etc.
Nice.
So as Simeon mentioned, more action oriented. And then we are currently discussing a content update that would be mid-year. But we don't really have, like, we've been discussing it. We've actually started some work on it, but we are kind of like waiting a little bit to see how people react to the game. Like, do people like the game? Like, I mean, what is the viability of kind of making those types of bigger content update to kind of add more missions or another world or another theme, etc., etc. So yeah, this one is kind of more in a more midterm future.
Okay, that's the flip side of the episodic stuff we were talking about. Is when I really like a game, a month feels like a year when there's something coming for it, and it's like I just want to play it.
It's true. To that regard, though, this is why we have like 2 tiers of content update. We have like the kind of like easier, more actionable one, which should be coming, as I said, in a month, and then we have like the more ambitious one that is like this one needs a little bit more planning.
Sure, and to have 2 different styles or tiers is a smart thing because keeps. Anytime you release content, it keeps, gets your name back out there and it brings it back to everyone's memory if they haven't played it for a bit. And so the more often you do that, I think it helps.
Well, I mean, particularly because for us, I mean, Stones of Harlath is a product of passion. So the more we know that players are engaged with our world and that they're happy in it and they're having fun and things like that. I mean, that's a reward in itself. And so that's the reason why we kind of want to kind of get a better feeling of like what is it that players are enjoying about our game, and can we deliver more of it.
So I'm curious with enemy design. Some of the enemies, like, were there certain enemies from like childhood or past games that you're just like that has to be in the game, or is it kind of just a fresh take on a lot of different enemies, or how did you work that out?
I'm not sure I want to answer that question.
Oh.
So the thing with Stones of Harlath is that the game is extremely tropey, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like one thing that I'm not sure was communicated or understood well about the game is that there is a kind of like it's not taking itself too seriously,
right?
And because it's like, yeah, I mean, it's it's kind of like it's like a Dungeon and Dragon campaign that is being written by a 12-year-old, right? And it's kind of like wearing it proudly on its sleeve, right? Yep. It doesn't try to be the next Skyrim.
I agree. I just love the fact that I got it right away what you're going for, and I'm curious the people that didn't, maybe they haven't played those old games, maybe they're younger people or something, but I think you guys nailed it. Like I really enjoyed it, and like I saw a couple of comments about voice acting, but I thought the voice acting was perfect. It's kind of cheesy and kind of
yeah, the voice acting is another thing. So yes, the voice acting, for example, some of my voice actors, like so actors with hair quotes there. There are 2 things. First of all, the people that I use their voice to record, like I work them hard to kind of like change their voice, like make it a little bit more exaggerated, etc. Mm-hmm. Brother Cody doesn't talk like that in the real life. Like, all right. So that's the first thing that you need to know. And the second thing that you need to know is Brother Cody is my neighbor. And I was not planning originally on using my neighbor. But what happened is that when it was time to record the voices and when we had like the structure of the story and the narrative, basically the pandemic was raging. I was planning actually using like sound booths, professional sound booth, do some professional sound recording, but all of this went out of the window. Like you could not book a sound booth, you could not book a voice recording actor in an enclosed space, etc., etc. And so I did what like indies do, shifted gear and say, well, you know what, I'm going to use the people around me, and that's what people have been doing in the 80s, right? I mean, you had like a lot of like unprofessional actors and things like that, and we made it sound like, I mean, I wanted those voices to be exaggerated. I remember like my brief to Brother Cody, I was like, I want you to play this part like if you were like right in the middle of a Scooby-Doo episode. Like Scooby-Doo was my reference. So I was like, you're a Scooby-Doo character. You're not serious, you're a cartoon character, you're heavily pixelated. You're saying some kind of like crazy stuff. It is not serious. Like I don't want you to kind of like go Shakespeare on me or anything like that. And so I think that there is I think in the voice acting there is kind of like 60% of attention and then 40% of like, well, I mean, we did with what we were dealt with. I tried some other actors, but the problem when you go with online services is that you get like recording differences, etc., that are very difficult to equalize. And I fell in love with those voices. I mean, because when I hear Brother Cody, I know the face of Brother Cody. I can hear my neighbor telling me all of this silly stuff. To me, it's part of the charm of the game. I know that some people struggle to kind of like understand that, and we are still kind of assessing that feedback.
Yeah, well, I loved it. I thought it was very like you said, playful, and it's not taking it so serious. And I chuckled the first couple times I talked to someone. So
yeah, these are real people. And they are not professional, and they just did that out of the kindness of their heart.
I was going to ask you more about some of the enemies, but you don't want to talk about them, so I won't.
Sorry, what's that?
Oh, I brought up the enemy characters, but you said you didn't really want to talk about them.
Oh, so. No. Yeah, no, I can answer that. Well, I'm sorry. I took a little bit of a...
Oh, no, that's fine.
...version there. But the enemies, it's the same thing. It's basically like, what are you expecting to see in a tropey fantasy game? Again, like something that is not super serious, right? I'm not trying to be like super dark. Like you see, the world is pretty light, even though like there is some darkness in the game. Like it's pretty bright, it's pretty colorful, it's pixel art. So I mean, spiders in the cellar. Rats in the cellar. I mean, if you played old school RPGs, you know that quest. It had to be there, right?
Yep, that's the first quest in every game.
Yes. So I mean, like that was a no-brainer. It's like, yes, you're going to get a character, and I like the idea that she was a wine merchant. Like, I mean, again, like we did not want the humor to be like ha ha ha, like I nudge you in the like more kind of like something. I'm not going to say subtle, because I don't necessarily think that Stones of Harlath is particularly subtle, but more kind of understated. The humor is there, but it's not like in your face.
Yeah.
But yeah, the rats in the cellar is obvious. The rats in the cellar is obviously kind of a reference to like, you know, like those Elder Scroll games. Spiders, you expect to see spiders in a fantasy game. Kobolds, like the little rat people in the mine. Specters and skeletons. I mean, all of those enemies, they kind of like become de facto, right? And then you have like a big tentacly monster. Obviously, for some obvious IP reasons, I cannot have a beholder or anything like that, but I can create something that is somewhat similar and use it as like a final boss, which is like there is like a small Cthulhu influence in Stones of Harlath. And so I wanted kind of a big tentacly monster at the end as your final boss.
Yeah, and I think that adds to the charm, like you said, because I went down in that. I knew what was going to happen before it happened. I'm like, there's going to be rats down in that cellar there. And I'm like, yep, can you please go kill all the rats in the cellar? And I just kind of laughed. I thought it was great.
I was reading an article on The Guardian I read The Guardian like daily, and they had like a piece on The Mummy, the 1999 movie, The Mummy, with Brendan Fraser and Rachel Weisz and things like that, which is with Indiana Jones, like part of my favorite movies. I love The Mummy, and what I loved about The Mummy is that all the cheesy stuff that you had like from the Hammer House movie, like the Boris Karloff and The Mummy, like all of those movies, like they kind of embraced it and they say, you know what, let's have fun with this. And I think that Stones of Harlath is a lot like that. It's like, let's not try to be too serious about all of this, but let's, at the opposite, let's embrace it and write it and have fun with it. And so our enemy design and our voice acting and our quests and our general storyline, they are all informed by that kind of like, let's not take ourselves too seriously.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. You mentioned like the different layouts and dungeons. Like I thoroughly enjoyed fighting up the spiral staircase area. That was really fun.
Yeah, we were talking about that. We were really hoping that it would kind of feel exactly what you were saying, PJ, earlier about the scale of things. Looking up at enemies that in a way that you couldn't in another medium, and the spiral staircase being another example of that. That would be super fun in VR. So
yeah, I wasn't really expecting anything aerial to come at me, but the first one that attacked me kind of made me jump a little bit. I'm like, oh crap, they're up there now. It took me off guard, so that's awesome.
Yeah, I think that's also was one of the points. I remember Simeon and I were super excited because, again, I was talking about changes and the fact that we want the game to kind of throw something different at you as much as we can. And so a lot of the dungeons have been kind of like horizontal so far. And then we bring that dungeon that is now introduce a little bit of verticality because you go kind of down.
Yeah.
You take some stairs and things like that. And then I was thinking of finishing that dungeon with like a purely vertical thing will be amazing because it will feel different. It will not feel like the previous dungeon or the one before that. So again, we are just trying to vary the experience so that players feel that they are doing something new every time.
Yeah, that was really neat. Again, if you don't want to say anything, it's fine. But is there anything that you wanted to get into the game that you probably won't be able to for one reason or another that you kind of wish you could? Or is this all hushed stuff that you might be able to add?
Simeon, you want to start with this?
Yeah, there are a few things that will likely be coming, actually. And so it's interesting that we had talked earlier about casting spells while moving. That was something that originally I had thought would be awesome, and then we kind of decided against it, and we kind of went the route where you had to stop and cast the spells, and then it kind of bounced back the other way again when we got feedback that people would enjoy to cast it while moving. So that was one thing that did actually make it in that I didn't know that it would. So that was one example. And then in the upcoming update as well, we have a whole bunch of very cool things, I think, that will make it in.
Some of the thing that we plan, like when you're going to kind of like go take a shot at making a game and bringing it to market, and particularly when you know that you're going to have to QA a whole bunch of stuff, you're going to kind of try to kind of simplify things and keep kind of like a strong core that is there and that is going to be fun. And then say, hey, you know what, if that core works out, I'm going to start attaching all of those different elements to that core once that core has been proving that it's working. The last thing that you want is to kind of start diverging, like find divergent elements that are going to kind of explore their own little stuff left and right, because now you're kind of making your project more and more complex and more difficult to finish. So I think that one of the things that we both, Simeon and I, agreed with at the beginning is like, let's kind of build a strong core of something that is fun and that people will enjoy interacting with. And then if we have the proof that people are actually enjoying working with this and playing with this and things like that, then we are going to add those elements, sometimes that are going to be more of the same, but most of the time that are going to be maybe very different, and that are going to kind of expand on the gameplay and make it even richer and richer and richer. So we do have plans. right now we are less than a month in launch, so we are kind of like also looking at we are looking at our metrics, how much people are playing and how many people are playing and things like that, and that's going to kind of educate some of the choices that we are going to make. It's like,
Sure.
oh, this seems popular, seems less popular. People are spending a ton of time on our game. We need to bring them like replayable content, or people are hungry for a bigger adventure, and so we need to bring them different content. We are kind of like learning as we go.
Okay.
If I could flip your question on its head for a moment,
Sure.
you had asked if there was something we thought would make it that didn't. But on the flip side of that, something made it in that I thought ended up being really cool that we hadn't planned for originally, which was the magic weapon system and having weapons that are empowered by spells. Originally, because we were shooting for a simple, straightforward, more casual experience, we weren't going to have a whole array of weapons or upgrades for weapons and stuff. But as it turned out, we were like, oh well, what if we could incentivize or like empower players in their melee combat to feel super cool, when they're hacking and slashing. Like Cyril said about things getting redundant, we don't want the sword play to get redundant. So we started adding, we added a mace that shoots electricity and stuff, and that actually turned into one of my favorite parts of the game. So that surprised me, where when we added some of the magic weapons, now I'm excited when I find a magic weapon, because for me that's one of the funnest parts.
Yeah.
I'm glad you talked about that, Simeon, because it's true. I'm right there with him. Like the magic melee weapons are one of my favorite parts of the game, and these came completely organically. Like we were not planning on those. Actually, we had a thing where it's like no inventory, right? Like we wanted to kind of like really streamline the management on the player side. So it's like we wanted an adventure that you could experience and not necessarily have your nose in an inventory all the time. But I think that Simeon Simeon is the one that created those magic weapons, and I'm like fully on board with those. Like they are one of the most satisfying thing in game.
Yeah, I picked up a flaming sword kind of early on. I was not expecting that. I'm like, oh, this is pretty sweet.
Oh, you haven't found... Is that the only one that you picked up?
No, I've found the lightning hammer and the shield. I found is there 2 variations of the shield, or are there more maybe?
No, there is a life-stealing shield, there is a freezing axe, and a thunder mace, and then the Warhammer. I don't remember the name of the Warhammer, but like the mana Warhammer. Like the Warhammer is like the ultimate weapon.
Nice.
Yeah, so I don't know if you've encountered it yet, but somewhere hidden on the island itself is the mana Warhammer, and then once you find it on the island, it unlocks it in the chests.
Okay.
So the chests kind of randomly spawn loot for you, and some of them are the melee weapons that are empowered by magical spells. And once you find the mana Warhammer, you can randomly pick it up in chests, and it's one of the coolest in my opinion.
One of the things that we really want is to kind of like empower players to use those magic weapons more in the future. So I think that whatever we do in the future, be it small scale or bigger scale, it's going to involve more weapons.
Awesome. I noticed once I found that flaming sword, it started popping up in chests. So is it just a random thing, or is it kind of like if you're low on health and mana, that might be what you might get out of the chest, or is it just totally random?
So that's a good question. Yeah. Did you want to comment?
No. Well, go for it.
Okay. So it's a little bit of both.
Nice.
There's a certain element of randomness, but in this game we were very, very intentionally designing things like our dungeons are not randomly generated; they're handcrafted. The waves in the arena, for example, are handcrafted waves; they're not random enemies. And so in this case as well, we wanted to have a certain level of control over when the player experiences certain things. So it does take into account your level of health and mana when randomly choosing to perhaps give you potions. But outside of that, it is very, very specific where you're going to pick up a magic weapon prior to a fight that would be fun to use it in, that type of thing.
Oh, nice. That's what it kind of seemed like, but I wasn't quite sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, all of this is intentional.
That's really smart because, again, VR is a little different medium, whereas like in a flat game, it's if some games you don't regen health and you have to like heal yourself. I'm playing this game on normal, I believe, whatever the normal setting is. And there's been some close calls, but for the most part, I've been doing pretty well. But you always find health right when you seem to kind of need it. So, and again, like,
and particularly because we wanted the experience to be forgiving to kind of starting players, like that goes with like, I mean, we are not a roguelike. Like Stones of Harlath is as far as roguelites as it can be. I enjoy roguelites, but it's a different design philosophy.
Oh. And I think that, again, VR is a little different. Like, I'm more into just exploring and experiencing something and having fun. Whereas, like, if I died and had to restart a whole like dungeon over or something, it might get a little old quick. Like, and
I agree with you. I think that we cannot afford the same levels of frustration that we would have in flat screen gaming as in VR. I think in VR we need to be have a little bit more leeway for the consumer to kind of like just enjoy their time, because just the processing power that it takes in their brain to kind of enjoy and kind of like soak the sights, kind of like look around and things like that. We know that the people are not necessarily going to be as laser sharp focused on the gameplay, that they may want. There is an experiential part that is going to be demultiplied as opposed to flat screen gaming, and particularly for Stones of Harlath, like pleasure and player empowerment were like two very driving pillars of our decisions. Does it feel good? Do players feel empowered? Do players feel powerful? Will players enjoy being there? Will players be bored? Like all of those things were things that we tried to pay attention to.
That's really, really smart, I think, and I appreciate it.
Yeah, and on the note of feeling empowered, to anyone who is listening, search out for that mana warhammer on the island, because I think that'll make you feel empowered.
I have a new quest.
It's a big gold and purple warhammer. You can't miss it when you see it.
When you see it.
Yeah, you gotta look around a little bit. That's the thing, right? Like we know that we have some players that kind of went from point A to point B, from point B to point C, and things like that. But we try to. That's why we hid those little treasures in the island and some of those weapons, is to kind of like encourage people to kind of like look around and explore a little bit.
Yeah, I like nothing better than taking out a tribe of the mermen and just kind of like rummaging through their belongings and their little huts.
Yeah. And the more you unlock spells, the more it becomes fun to kind of like approach those fights differently and, like freeze them into place and then execute them, or like use a blizzard spell. And it's like the combination of those should allow you for like a lot of like creative freedom on like how you're going to obliterate those enemies.
That blizzard spell, I cast that and was just walking around killing bats without even, just by walking past them. I felt pretty badass.
Yep.
Yeah. On the topic of, no, you can go.
It's funny because like I was discussing with a player and they were like, "Did you guys thought about like progression, right? Like a more kind of like RPG stat-based system and things like that?" And I was like, well, it's not really what Stones of Harlath was trying to be. Even though we thought about it, we were trying to kind of make a game that would be simple to interact with from the player standpoint. But the reality is that progression, you have it, right? At the beginning, you have like a fire spell, which is pretty serviceable and has like those two functions, right? You can cast fireballs, or you can like create a big fire bomb. But like later, the last dungeon, when you get that blizzard spell, like tell me it's not progressing.
Yeah.
So that's the thing, right? You get spells that are increasingly more powerful, that allows you to kind of like damage more enemies in a bigger variety of circumstances. So even though it's not stat based and you don't necessarily have a skill tree where you're getting spells that are becoming increasingly more powerful or more useful for you. And I think that's how we handled progression.
Do you have something to say, Simeon? We both kind of cut you off.
No, that's okay. You touched on it a good deal, Cyril. To expand a little bit, we do still, have an element of freedom for all the players. We want them to feel free to, if they really do like the fireball, or if in the heat of combat that's the only shape they can remember, that's fine. Like you can use the fireball as much as you want. But for those players that want to try out new things, we had in mind when designing the later spells some certain combinations of spells to use in combat that would be very helpful. I don't want to give them all away because some of them are pretty cool, but a basic one would be, just placing a shield, a mana shield. When it blocks projectiles, it regenerates your mana for you.
Yeah.
And then from behind there, you can shoot out attacks from behind, or later on you get a life regenerating type of thing. And placing the level 2 version of that along with the level 1 version of the mana shield, and see what happens. Take out a wave in the arena using that, and it's pretty cool in my opinion. So
yeah, I haven't got to the arena yet. I like to get through the story and then tackle that kind of stuff. But in the video I shared, like, I was just kind of messing around and I wasn't even really thinking about it. I cast the time slow spell and then I hit that blizzard thing, and you just watch all the bats pop into piles of bones and in slow motion. And I was like, yeah, I'm going to the arena with that one. So
Yeah, no. The arena is really the perfect place for you to have fun with those spell combinations and kind of like see what works for you. So we are very impatient to maybe see more of this. Spoiler alert.
Nice. Well, we normally go for an hour before we call it. Is there anything else you guys want to share that we didn't get to, or? Because I don't know if you've listened to any episodes, but if you let us, like Wookie and I, will just like hold the guests hostage and keep asking questions, and you'll be here till way too late.
Yeah, as far as I'm concerned, I think we covered a lot of. I mean, is there any question, PJ, that you haven't asked yet, or is there anything that's?
I guess I'll ask, with the plans for future content, are you looking at? And again, you can be vague. I won't mind, but adding like weapons and enemies and area type thing, like the whole gambit, or are you guys kind of looking to focus on certain things?
that's a good question.
All the above.
Awesome.
A little bit of each, a fair balance, I would say.
I'm like the greedy gamer. I'm always like, I want more of this, more of that, more of that, and it's like, I don't know what you guys are going through. Like, maybe it's. I mean, I'm not saying it's easy to develop anything, but it's like, I've put my foot in my mouth where, like, I forget I'm talking to like a one-man team, and he's like, yeah, I'll get to that in like 8 months. So I'm always kind of leery of asking questions like that, but
No. I mean, listen, we don't mind when players ask us that, because that means that they are enjoying the content that is there.
Right.
And the reality of it is that when you spend as much time and as much like nights and weekends and days as we did on the game, the best thing for us is to kind of like let us know that you're enjoying our
Sure.
content, because like we did not do this to live in a castle in France, right? Like, that's a project of passion. Like, we enjoyed working together, and we are proud of our product. And so, when you do something that you like and you're proud of it, the best thing that can happen to you is when other people are like, hey, you know what, I'm enjoying it too, and I want more of it. Like, this is never going to offend us. Now, the reality is that, yes, of course, we are two people. So we are two people with jobs and things like that. So
yeah.
There is a certain timeline that needs to kind of like be realistic. But we are also, we've worked 1.5 years together. We are starting to be pretty efficient at it. And we shipped the game with the idea of like, hey, you know what, if people like it, because we are excited, we started thinking about, okay, what can be next? And we started dividing what can be next that can be done quickly and what can be next that is going to require more work. So for what can be done quickly on a like 1 month, 2 month timeline, we have a pretty good idea of where we want to go. And I would, it's already in motion.
Awesome.
It got paused. Because we had to kind of like take care of like, the left-hand mode and all that stuff. But now that we took care of it, we can refocus on like adding those new stuff. And then as we are going to release that new stuff, and then we are going to see how is it received by players. And then we'll kind of adjust our plan for the more longer term stuff. You know, like when you're a small team, that's the beauty of it, is that you can be a little bit more reactionary and kind of like do something, put it in the hands of player, see what happens, and then course correct.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of devs that we've talked to say that, and I think that's just the feedback. Like, you know, everyone has a Discord, and that's where you get a lot of your feedback nowadays. I think that's just amazing because I've seen it change the course of many games, and it's just a great thing when the dev can get that information and actually like work with it and make something really great.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the reality of making games, right? You want to make products that people are enjoying. So like being able to measure where their enjoyment is and being able to kind of like do more of the same so that you know that they will engage with the content and be happy with it. I mean, I think is where every single game developer wants to be.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think you hit the nail on the head, Cyril, with you know, it's a passion project for us. So we're not sorry that people want more content. We're excited. Yeah, we're happy to give you more content. This is what we love, you know?
Yeah. I'm glad to hear it. I can't wait to see what you guys do and where you take the players.
Can't wait to take them there.
I did have one last question. It's kind of a personal question. I was just curious, where do you teach?
I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say the name, but I can tell you that I teach video game design and video game production into art college that is located in the charming town of Savannah, USA.
Okay. I only ask because
with that it should be easy to find out.
Yeah. I was just curious because you know, Wookie and I are from Wisconsin where I live, but he lives down in the Carolinas. He moved down there like 20 years ago to go to a gaming school because he's a pretty good artist, and we're both into tech and stuff. So he went to a school down there, and I was just curious if maybe that was it.
And so is it?
No, it's your neighbor one.
Okay.
From Florida.
Gotcha. Florida. Okay. Yeah. I've been in Savannah since 2004.
Nice.
And before that, I was in France, and then before that, I was in Africa, and before that, I was in South America. So I traveled a fair bit.
Yeah. It's exciting. That's pretty interesting. Have you been making games like while you've been living in all those locations? I'm always curious, like how different locations kind of create different games or genres.
That's an interesting. So, my dad was a civil engineer, and I was one of the lucky few to have a computer in my household at a very, very early age. I think I got my first computer. I mean, not mine, but my dad bought the first computer. I was 7, and I'm an older guy, so at that time there were not that many people that had like personal computers, and I like playing video games. And my dad had that deal with me. It's like for every hour that I was playing a video game, he wanted me to spend an hour learning how to program or like do something with computers. And so I kind of learned how to use computers at a very early age. And then I kind of like, you know, became a teenager, and like my attention focused on other stuff. I studied to become an advertiser. And so I worked in advertising, and I started using computers again. In 2000 or like 1999, internet became kind of like a bigger thing. As a advertising professional, I started kind of like looking at internet as a way it could kind of change our profession. And so at that time I learned Flash. And then Flash allowed you to make, you know, websites and stuff like that. But Flash was pretty powerful. And so I started making video games in Flash.
Nice.
And so that's how I came back into video games. And I made a fair amount of like mobile games and browser games in Flash and in Java later. And then when VR kind of came up, I was like, you know what, it's a new thing, and it kind of like reminded me when like I moved to the web, you know, being kind of like a guy that was making like TV ads and posters and stuff like that, and kind of getting on the adventure of discovering a new technology, and everybody goes on the web and nobody really knows what they're doing, but we are all doing it happily and things like that. Like VR kind of felt that exciting to me. It's like
That makes sense. I can see that.
I just kind of like the idea of like tagging along with that new technology and figuring it out.
We must...
So at a time where people are talking about bringing ads back in games,
Yeah.
well, you have an example of a story of a guy that used to make ads and that now make games. So it's kind of the reverse narrative.
Nice. Yeah, we must be a similar age because I was around 6 or 7. My dad got an old IBM. Well, it wasn't old at the time, but I don't know how I did it, but I somehow mail ordered this box of games, and you had to like know coding to get them to like boot up at the time.
Oh yeah.
I honestly don't remember. I don't know how I did any of that, but I did it.
No, it was insane. I mean, like my first game, you would play a cassette, a tape.
Mm-hmm.
My first computer was a ZX81. So if you're in America, it's not going to tell you much because it was a Sinclair computer. It was made in England, so I don't think these were very popular on the US territory. But I think that the equivalent was the VIC-20 from Commodore.
Sure.
But my second computer was a Commodore 64. So that kind of gives you an idea of my age.
Yep.
And the reason why, like, most of the games that I make rely around pixel art and like, old classics and stuff like that, because these are the games I grew up with.
Right. That's pretty funny. I guess anyone listening to the episode will have links in the show notes to your game. You guys are on Quest 2. You're on Steam, right?
So we are not on Steam yet.
Okay.
So we that's actually a good well, you were asking like things that we wish so we were planning to have the PC VR version of the game for July 15. For that matter, it was July 14 to kind of coincide with the French Independence holiday.
Okay.
Because why not? But we had a little bit of work to do to kind of like add some of those things that were missing on the Quest version. So I think we are going to delay the PC VR version a little bit. And so what we are going to do is we are going to align it with our next content release, so that when we release on PC VR, we'll release with the actual content release, and then we are going to push that content release for the Quest as a free update. In the meantime, I think it's a little too early right now to give a date, but it should be within the summer.
Nice. I said it makes sense to release it that way with the extra content on PC. That's good.
Yeah, and we want to also kind of like, we both have Oculus devices, but we would like to test a little bit what's happening on the Vive and, the Index and things like that. So there is a bunch of stuff that we want to kind of like try out before making kind of a commitment on a date.
Sure. Awesome. Well, thank you guys for your time and the game. Like I find it charming. I love it. Like I said, I just get in there and walk around sometimes if I only have a couple minutes. So I really dig it. I can't wait to see more.
Thank you very much for having us.
Yeah, anytime.
Yeah. Thanks. This was fun.
If you ever want to join us again and talk about an update or anything like that, we'll definitely be glad to have you back.
We will gladly do so. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Bye.
Yeah, have a good evening.
Thank you very much for having us again, and then talk to you later.
Yeah, can't wait to... sure, I'll see you on Twitter and then in Discord, so...
Thanks.
Yep.
Bye.
Bye. Well, everyone, that was Cyril and Simeon from Garage Collective, working on Stones of Harlath. A great pixel art RPG, well, old school RPG exploration game. Dungeon crawler, a little bit of everything. Again, all the links are in the show notes. Definitely check it out. It's charming as hell. I love being in the game. Takes me back to my childhood, so I'm sure maybe the younger people won't get that, but it's still a good time. The mechanics are great. It runs really well. But check it out. But for this episode, I am PJ, and Wookie wasn't here, obviously. I'll get on him for you. Kick him in the butt. No, he had something come up. It's like the third one he's missed, so I forgive him. But thanks everyone for hanging out and listening. We'll catch you next time. I am PJ, and this was our VR Verdict.